Wonderful. You made it through the thick underbrush, through that crocodile-infested river, past the quicksand, and you've made it back to our base camp on this Coin Safari Volume 3, where we're going to be talking about the gold coins that we sent off to NGC. If you are new to the channel, my name is White Cross, and I'll be your safari guide on this journey if you're one of my returning subscribers. Thank you guys, as always, for being here. I genuinely appreciate you sharing more time with me. So in Coin Safari 1, we had a selection of coins that we had found in the wild. These are pieces that were unslabbed, raw is what we would call them, never having been graded by a third-party grader. And the silver pieces in particular were some of the trickiest ones for people who aren't familiar with these series. This is a very heavily counterfeited series of coins, those yuan shikai dollars and those Chinese junk dollars with Sun Yat-sen on the front of them. Huge counterfeits of these pieces. They are everywhere. So finding original pieces is quite unusual. Finding pieces that haven't been messed with too much is very unusual also. And we were fortunate. We sent those pieces off to NGC. Again, it's been about 90 days since we did that. But our win stack, these are the pieces that graded at least as high as I had hoped they would grade, is much higher than our lose stack. And even that lose, I was hoping that this one piece would come back as a straight graded AU50. Remember we talked about those adjectival phrases in the last video. That is a group of words that are tied to the Sheldon numeric grade. So in this case, that adjectival phrase would have been about uncirculated, and the numeric grade that I was hoping for was 50 on the Sheldon scale. Coins are graded from 1 to 70, 1 being almost a theoretically bad grade, 70 being a almost theoretically good grade. So I was hoping for about uncirculated 50. NGC determined that they thought the coin had been cleaned at some point in the past, and they gave it an uncirculated details grade. There were still enough details that they could judge that the coin was in circulated condition when it had unfortunately been cleaned. So that's a bit of a wash. I would rather have the straight grade, but I'm not too terribly disappointed with the uncirculated details. So that wrapped up kind of the last of the silver pieces, the Yunnan province, that wound up being legitimate and authentic, even though I had originally thought it was counterfeited because it had been harshly cleaned. And this AU50 graded, or hoped for an AU50 grade on this junk dollar that came back uncirculated details. So let's dive right into the gold pieces. Gold is kind of what we're here for anyway, right? The first piece, and we're going to go in the same order that we did in Coin Safari Volume 1, so you can follow along, score at home if you'd like to. The first piece is this one here. This is the 1890 Mexican peso. Peso is a very small gold coin, and if you are a bullion stacker but you've never seen one of these pesos before, they haven't ever really been kind of considered part of Mexican bullion the same way that these two smaller coins are. This is a 2 peso and a 2.5 peso. Very popular coins, mostly restrikes. We talk about restrikes a lot on this channel. These are coins that are struck with the same date, even many, many years after that date has occurred. So the 2 peso here, the 2.5 peso coin, you can see how that the size is very similar to the 1 peso. I do have a couple of 1 pesos in my stack. These are pieces that I picked up years ago, almost kind of unintentionally, but it's been a very long time since I've picked up a 1 peso. And I'll show you what this piece looked like when I got it. Remember that these pieces all were ones that I selected from a dealer's kind of older stock of smaller gold coins. That was the source of most of these pieces that we sent off. And the original flip that the dealer had was probably made by the original owner of this piece in the 1970s, I would guess. And you can see here that they thought the coin was superb uncirculated, superb brilliant uncirculated. A word of warning, even with these older 2x2s, these flips, you can't always believe what the individual had written on that. We'll have another example of that a little bit later. It's just their best guess. And this was a time really before third-party graders like this piece from NGC. So we have to take what older collectors said with a grain of salt. And I did that. I like to be a little bit conservative when I'm estimating grades of pieces. This piece, even though it looked like it was a really nice coin, I don't have a lot of experience with them. So I was comfortable saying that I was hoping for an MS62 grade. 1891 peso Guanajuato mint, Guanajuato 200 miles northwest of Mexico City, kind of a branch mint. A mintage of just 1,916 pieces, but remember, like I said in the earlier videos, that doesn't necessarily mean that these are valuable. It just means that they had small mintages. Aren't nearly as many collectors of these smaller late 19th century, early 20th century gold pieces from Mexico as there are for the same kind of series from the American mint. So a smaller mintage, a very small mintage, 1916, about the size of a 2.5 peso, and I predicted an MS62. What did NGC say? What did those taxidermists say? Let's take a look here. MS65. Now, that's a bit of a shock. When we're talking about coins, especially the ones that are above that MS level, that is on the Sheldon scale of 1 to 70, anything 16 above is considered mint state. That is also uncirculated. So two of those adjectival phrases that kind of mean the same thing. Anything 16 above is considered mint state. I was hoping for a 62. And the difference between one grade, especially when you get into this uncirculated, this mint state range of 60 to 70, can be very, very large in terms of value and scarcity. So a 63 would have been nice, a 64 would have been super nice, and a 65 is incredibly nice, and let me tell you exactly why. This is one of the biggest surprises of this entire group. There have only been 4 MS65s graded by NGC and 1 MS66. So this piece is not quite what we would call a pop top. That means a population top. But it does mean that there are only 4 of these that have been ever graded by NGC with only 1 graded higher. We would say that was a 4/1 when we're talking about populations. So this is a very scarce grade. You might say that this is a technical 65, which means that in this case, it is a numeric scarcity or a grade scarcity. There just aren't very many of these pieces out there in this condition, a conditional rarity. And when you're talking about a mintage of only 1,916 pieces to begin with, to know that this is one of the highest graded pieces that has ever been seen by NGC means that this is actually a very exceptional coin. Thrilled beyond belief to have gotten this one back. This one definitely goes on the win stack. And I'm thrilled to have this be part of my permanent collection. Most of these pieces I will probably keep. No intention of selling any of them. You never say never. These aren't really part of my focus, but I bought this gold because I wanted to celebrate an event. I wanted to have it be part of my permanent stack. Having it in these NGC slabs just adds that consistency, that validation of grade, and proving the authenticity of the pieces. Very important when you're talking about gold. Foreshadowing. So, 1 gold coin in the win stack. That's pretty nice. The next piece is the 1860 Guatemala 4 reale. Now, this piece, I almost was flip about it if you look back at the first video. I bought this piece because it was really tiny and really cute, and we'll compare it to a 2 peso also. That's this little itty-bitty tiny gold coin. Let's see if we can take a look at it there. So you can see how big it is compared to even a 2 peso. It's so much smaller. 1860 Guatemala 4 reale. One of the smallest gold coins that I own, one of the smallest gold coins that I've ever submitted, probably the smallest gold coin that I've ever submitted to a third-party grader. If you are looking at the 2023 gold year in review, you'll see one of the coins that kind of rivals this one in size. And while I'm droning on, you're probably asking yourself, why is it in this plastic case instead of one of these plastic cases? Now, if you came to this video from Coin Safari 2, you already know the answer to that one. This was a shock. This one was a surprise. And this one still has me scratching my head. 1860 Guatemala 4 reale. I predicted that it would at least be mint state. Are you ready for it? You probably already know the answer. You're right. Not encapsulated because it is not genuine. This coin is a fake. At least that's what NGC says about it. Now, I didn't do a lot of due diligence when I was looking through these pieces. It never occurred to me that this little tiny bitty gold coin would be a counterfeit, would be a fake. And that just goes to show you, even though I have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, I probably should have taken a little bit more time to take a look at it. But in reality, this piece doesn't look fake. There's nothing that would raise any kind of red flags about it. It looks like a little tiny gold coin. I'm trying to get it to focus with it in that second holder there. There we go. Right? That looks real, doesn't it? This is a really important lesson. I spent so much time harping on those silver coins from China and the fact that they are so easily counterfeited. There are so many of them that are out there that are fake. I wasn't paying attention to what I was even doing myself. A great lesson for me. It's an important lesson that I'm going to try to remember. And again, we will be doing a video or 2 or 3 about counterfeit gold coins in the very near future. 1860, 4 reale from Guatemala. The interesting thing about this piece is that I have since tested it with my Sigma, but it is so small that I can't even get a reading on it. Often when you find counterfeit gold coins, especially when you're talking about counterfeit sovereigns, you're talking about counterfeit $2.50, $5 gold pieces from the United States of America, you'll find that a lot of those pieces are actually made out of gold. They were made in a very specific situation, and they were made out of gold. They weren't trying to necessarily deceive anybody. They were just trying to fulfill a need, the people that were making them. And I kind of suspect that might have been what this one is too. But I have searched high and low to try to find additional counterfeit issues of this 1860 Guatemala piece. And I couldn't find any. Usually when you have a series that is heavily counterfeited, you can look online, you can Google, and you can find examples that are out there that are very close, if not identical, to your piece. It's one of the nice things about using these types of tools that we have now at our fingertips. If I had been able to find lots of counterfeit examples of this piece, I would feel a lot worse for having spent the time and money to send this one off. Now, my dealer has actually already offered to refund my money on this piece, but I'm not having any of it. I bought this piece in good faith. They sold it to me in good faith. I had plenty of time to look at it really carefully. They didn't make any claims about it being authentic. It also was just in an old school 2x2. And lesson learned, right? The interesting thing about this, and I might sound like I'm rationalizing a little bit here, and maybe I am to try to make myself feel a little bit better, and believe me, if you're laughing along with me, I deserve it. There are gilt copper versions of this piece known, even NGC, for the example that they have on their own website, indicates that that example is a gilt copper. Gilt, it just means gold plated. So I have tried to do research to find out exactly why they had made gilt copper versions of them. Sometimes when coiners are kind of making models and patterns for pieces that are to be released, they coin in copper, obviously a lot less expensive and relatively easy to work with than coining in silver or gold. And then they just gold plate them so they can show them to the powers that be. The mint officials can show them to the legislators or the president or the king or whoever is in charge to kind of show them what this piece will look like when they finally go into full production of it. And I suppose that's a possibility. But it's intriguing and interesting that even NGC shows as their plate coin, as their demonstrated version of this piece, that their own piece is a gilt copper piece. And maybe that's what this piece is. Strange that they wouldn't have caught it. Strange that they wouldn't have suggested that that's what that is. But, lesson learned. This was $75 that I blew on the wrong thing. I have tried to learn from that. Hopefully you can try to learn from it too. Does this go in the win or the lose pile? This one definitely goes in the lose pile. That was a case of the hunter becoming the hunted. Moving right along. 1963 Peruvian gold 10 soles. Now, I mentioned that this piece was very similar in a lot of ways to the 100 sole piece that I have, and I'll show the picture of the 100 sole piece here as well. It's the same style, the same elements on it. These are just slightly smaller. So this one is a 10 sole. The larger piece is a 100 sole. And I said in that original video that I thought that this piece might come back with a proof-like designation because you can see that really nice frosty cameo on the reverse. But I was a little bit hesitant when I was talking about it in Coin Safari Volume 1 because it really just looked like the reverse, the back of the coin that had that really nice mirrored proof shine to it, that cameo contrast. The obverse, a really nice strike, the obverse, the front of the coin, but the reverse I thought at least had the potential to be cameo, and sometimes you'll get that proof-like designation based on how strong one side is. I was hoping that this piece would come back mint state, and I was hoping it would come back with that proof-like designation, if nothing else just to match the 100 sol piece that we talked about earlier. So, what did the taxidermist say about this 63 proof-like? They said, no proof-like designation, but an MS67. So they thought it was in much better state of preservation than I did. I thought it was going to come back a 63 proof-like. They said a 67. How much is that proof-like designation worth? That's a really, really good question. If you have a 63 proof-like, is it worth, legitimately worth, valued at the same as a 64? Or is it maybe a 65? Is it only worth maybe half an upgrade? So if you're looking at the prices, does that impact the price just a little bit? It's difficult to say. It really goes from series to series. Some people like proof-like designations. Given my choice of a 63 proof-like and a 63, which one would I pick? I would pick the 63 proof-like. Stack on as many of those designations as you possibly can. In this case, I think a 67 definitely trumps a 63, even if it had come back without the proof-like. A 63 is 4 steps down from the 67, and the 67 is a relatively low number of these pieces graded also. There are 10 graded 67 by NGC, with none higher, which means that this technically is a pop top. This is the highest graded example. Now it ties with 10 other pieces that are also 67s, so it's tied as a pop top, but the thing is that there are no 68s, 69s, or 70s in this series, so this is technically a pop top. A win? Definitely a win. This goes on that win stack also. Glad to have that as a 67. I wasn't expecting it. Clearly, I was hoping for a 63 proof-like. If it had come back as 64 instead of that 63 proof-like, I don't know if that would really be a win, but a 65, definitely. 66, absolutely. And a 67, yeah, that's a pretty phenomenal win. We're doing pretty well, right? Except for this one Guatemala 4 Realia that keeps on looking me in the face while I'm shooting this video for you. The last one is one of the most interesting gold pieces that I've picked up in the last 10 years, and I'm still trying to kind of wrap my hand around exactly what it is. So this is the 1961 ducket of Werner Graul, and we've talked about Werner Graul and his ducats quite a bit on this channel in the last couple of weeks and months. He was a German artist, a philosopher, kind of a Renaissance man, and he had been in his home country of Germany after the war, after World War I, before World War II. And he had seen his life savings, his fortune disappear completely because of the devaluation of the German currency and that inflation and hyperinflation between the wars. And he didn't just lose his life saving once, he lost his life savings twice. And he felt that one of the reasons that had happened is because the average citizen was no longer able to get their hands on gold. He saw gold as a way to fight inflation and hyperinflation. And I think he had something there. I think that was a really smart kind of visionary thing to do. So with his resources, he struck a series of samples, example pieces like this, patterns, if you will, of what a gold coin could look like. And he denominated them in a traditional German gold coin denomination called a ducat. A ducat is just kind of a small 3.5 gram size gold coin, kind of a typical piece that is used in Germany and in the Netherlands, but they're popular all over Europe. So this is kind of a traditional 3.5 gram size ducat of 98% pure gold. And he made these pieces in silver, and he also made them as small as half ducat all the way up to, I want to say, 100 ducat. So great, big, huge presentation piece. And he offered these pieces to the economic powerhouses of a lot of the Western countries of the world. So the economists, the people who are officiaries of their mints and the respected governments, to try to convince them to go back on some kind of a gold standard. But ultimately it didn't work. So these pieces mostly struck as patterns. We don't really know how many examples he struck. There was a series where he had different designs on them, and this one is supposed to be Queen Nefertiti of Egypt. Kind of a beautiful gold coin, and you can see he called these Oris Magnus. That's what he called them, the power of gold. Gold is great. And they're just really kind of an interesting design. Never having seen one before, using Tom's Law that we've talked about often on this channel, the longest that you've been doing something like this, if you haven't seen something before, it could be that length of time before you ever see it again, if you ever see it again. So while I had originally taken this piece and kind of set it aside and hadn't thought very much about it, I'm really glad that ultimately I came back to it in that group of smaller gold coins and bought this piece. I was hoping for a Proof 65 designation. It was my hope that this piece would be recognized by NGC as a proof rather than an uncirculated strike. And again, you can see those kind of mirrored surfaces without very much experience in this series. I didn't know if he had struck uncirculated versions or just these proof versions, or if this was a proof-like version, kind of like the reverse of that 10 sols that we just looked at. So my hope was Proof 65, straight Proof 65. That's what I was after. And what did it grade? Oh, let's see what the taxidermist said. Ready? Proof 66 Ultra Cameo. Now, in my haste to get these pieces off, I had just said Proof 65, and I hadn't really even worried about the designation. When it comes to proof coins, NGC and PCGS both kind of grade them in 3 different levels. You can have your standard proof, you can have a proof cameo, and you can have a proof ultra cameo. And it all depends on kind of the mirrored difference between the frosted devices and those mirrored fields. So if the frost is super strong and the fields are really deep, then they will designate these pieces that are proofs an ultra cameo. And they did that for this piece. I hadn't even really been thinking about that designation. Super stoked to have gotten this one back as a 66 ultra cameo. And it also is incredibly scarce. There are a few sales records that are visible online if you're Googling them, but most of them go back 5 or 6 or 8 years. And most of the pieces that you see online are ex-jewelry. Again, these are pieces that have been put into a bezel for somebody to wear around their neck, so they have become impaired proofs. They are still technically a proof coin, because proof, again, is a manufacturing process. It's not a grade. But you can have a proof anywhere on that 1 to 70 Sheldon scale also. It really depends on how much wear it's seen, how much use it's seen, how much rub and friction it's seen. And those pieces that are mounted in jewelry tend to get a fair amount of friction, so much so that it kind of almost removes the proof surfaces of those pieces. So this is, I believe, the only example that NGC has ever graded of this piece. And PCGS has graded one of them, but their example is a 65 deep cameo. That's their designation for great contrast between the frosted devices and the mirrored fields. So this 66, possibly the highest graded example ever of this coin. Does that make it valuable? Unfortunately, not necessarily. There are so few auction results that it's really difficult to see just how valuable these are. And it's one of those weird dichotomies that sometimes when a coin is not of a very large population, there tend to be fewer and fewer people who collect it. Now, it's a weird change of events, a weird turnabout, because you can have incredibly rare coins that are seen as incredibly valuable and people clamor for them whenever they come up for sale. But sometimes you have so few pieces that the collector base is not very big, and therefore the demand is not very strong. And we saw that with that Mexican piece, right? Just because it is an incredibly small mintage of 1,916 pieces, and just because this is one of the few pieces that's been graded as 64 with only one graded higher, doesn't mean it's super valuable. Yes, it has value. Yes, it would be relatively easy to sell. But there are so few examples of it that trying to find the right market to buy it can be a bit of a struggle. Nevertheless, I am thrilled that NGC recognized this as a proof. That was really my biggest concern. They saw it as the condition of the proof one step higher than even I did. And even though I hadn't been thinking about those designation, they awarded it the Ultra Cameo designation. and that makes it probably the single highest graded example of this piece in existence. Neat. That's pretty cool. So, a conclusion of the coin safari, we went from the original ones that we found out in the wild, talking about those, my predictions of how they would kind of come back from NGC. I sent them to NGC, and it took forever. Fortunately for you, through the power of the internet and the power of video editing, you didn't have to sit there and wait and wait and wait like I did for these pieces to show back up. And I'm super excited that our win pile is a pretty tall pile of brand new, freshly slabbed pieces. And our loss pile, well, there was one that was okay, and there's one that was a big disappointment. Clearly, that's that 1860 Guatemalan gold piece. But, you know, if I had to lose on any of those, the very smallest gold piece that I've ever submitted to a third-party grader is probably not the end of the world. So what do you think? Would you have graded these any differently? Are there any that you are particularly interested in? Would you like me to talk about any of them individually at length? If you have any questions about any of the pieces that you saw here on the Coin Safari, if there are any questions you have about the process of submitting pieces, incidentally, this is what they come back to you in. This is obviously, really express mail, expensive insurance and all that kind of stuff. And they come in this kind of accordion of slots that the slabs all go in. NGC always does a fantastic job of boxing these up and shipping them out. No worries when it comes to that, but man, those wait times take forever. Questions about the process, leave it down below and I'll try to address it if I possibly can. If there are any other coin series that you'd like to see me make a video of or videos of, leave a comment down below and I'll see if I've got the knowledge base and the examples so we can talk about and possibly answer whatever questions you might have. And remember to like and subscribe the videos. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would love to have you be part of this community. We would love to see this grow next year and beyond. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.